Terrific for him.
Yeah.
So let's move on to our next guest. From American Idol to regenerative medicine, stem cell research holding so much promise. How far has the field really gotten? And we're so happy to have one of the leaders in this field with us again. Michael West, Dr. Michael West, I should say, is the CEO of BioTime. Now, BioTime is headquartered in Alameda, California. It's a biotech company that focuses on regenerative medicine, blood plasma volume expanders, stem cell technologies. They have several subsidiaries working on many different aspects of this. Mike's in town for the Investor Day that was held yesterday. So first of all, welcome. Great to have you in studio again.
It's my pleasure.
And thank you for inviting me to the event. I couldn't see the whole thing, but when I got there for the last hour and a half or so, really got a head full of information.
Yeah, that was the intent, I think.
Well, I think you succeeded.
Yeah.
So first of all, Mike, tell people a little bit more about BioTime. You've grown a lot since the last time you were on the show, both in terms of market cap and in terms of all these subsidiaries you've developed or acquired.
Yeah. Well, the field's growing very rapidly. I think probably the public, the investment public, probably hasn't a good perspective on how rapidly it's growing. The thought in the early days was, a lot of these revolutions, of which the stem cell research is one of, like you remember the recombinant DNA revolution. It's what we call Biotech today, the beginnings of Genentech and Amgen, these first companies. The product development took 10 to 15 years. And so there was a lot of, calibrating of clocks for people thinking, well, it's going to take 15 years at least before we start to see products entering the clinic. A second revolution in biotech was what we call the monoclonal antibody revolution. Now, about approximating 50% of new drug development is now based on this revolution. Stem cells are actually going faster, and the reason is, medical research today is far more capable of advancing products quickly. Medical research is, I think of it as being like 1,000 times more powerful than it was 10 to 15 years ago from many new advances in, the merger of computer technologies, microarray analysis, and that sort of thing.
This is a controversial field. How did you decide to get into this?
Well, not because I like controversy. You're right. It has been the vortex of controversy for the last 10 years, less so today. My reason for getting into the field really was I'm a gerontologist. I study aging. And the number one problem as we grow older is age-related degenerative disease. So our bodies have a limited ability to repair damaged or diseased cells and tissues in our body. And that's aggravated as we age. But as it plays out then, as we get old, the cartilage in our joints, for instance, all that rushing around town, and the cartilage in your knees wears down, kind of like the rubber on your tires, and the body simply can't regrow it and repair it. And so we looked for, based on all of our understanding of how aging works and how cells age and all that, we came up with this on the blackboard, the holy grail here would be to be able to do with the human body what we do with a car that's worn out, where the tires and so on, is replace them. And so we tried to invent a new technology we call regenerative medicine, which would allow us to make all the components of the human body to repair it. Simple concept, really, but something that medicine has never, ever been able to do. And the exciting thing is now we can do.
So update us, because I think Courtney kind of is touching on, there's been a big debate over embryonic stem cells versus adult stem cells, and of course there's cord cells now as well. Where does that stand? Are we past that controversy? Is it holding the field back?
Well, we're not past the controversy, although over 70% of Americans back it, and support it. And all of the debate was always about not whether companies should be allowed to commercialize the technology, but whether federal funds grants should be given from the federal government. A similar controversy, as I alluded to, revolved around the early days of recombinant DNA. There were a lot of scare stories. We're going to play God. We're going to, make bombs from we're going to destroy the world, And indeed, I remember back in the late 1970s, recombinant DNA was banned in the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts, the home of MIT and Harvard University. Today, recombinant DNA is absolutely fundamental in medical research and drug development. So, there's been, it held back some federal funds. Of course, ultimately that was...
How much are we talking about? How much are we talking about in the holdback in federal funds?
Well, it's not being held back anymore under President Obama, but under President Bush for a period of months, he ordered the National Institute of Health to stop all federal funding for embryonic stem cell research. And then August 9th, 2001, he addressed the American people and said, I'll allow it under these stringent guidelines.
So what role how far, I guess that's another question, where are we? Where does the field stand? Where does BioTime stand in actually developing products that can sort of, stop the clock or turn back the clock of actual cell aging? Because I think that's one of the frustrations. I mean, one of the exciting things about investing in a biotech company is it's new and it's small and it holds great hope. The frustration is that, as you point out, it can take a while to get there, even though you say this is moving faster now.
It's a tough business model in biotech because, on the one hand, you have the enormous potential markets. I mentioned osteoarthritis. It's just one of, heart failure and type 2 diabetes and Parkinson's, and the list goes on and on. But, the opportunity is for the pain of arthritis. And the number one complaint, by the way, of an aging population is osteoarthritis. 26 million Americans, rising rapidly. Now we have this age wave hitting the shores. Mm-hmm. So the opportunity is great. But the challenge is, these companies, I mentioned Genentech. Genentech had to attract investors and lose $1 billion before they could become profitable. And that's the biotech model. And so it's a tough model. But the good news, as I said, enormous breadth of opportunity. The platform here we're operating under, the platform technology, is the broadest and strongest platform in the history of medicine. The ability to rebuild the human body. The product opportunities are trillion-dollar markets in total. It's an enormous opportunity. So that's a good thing. We still have the long timeline to product development. One answer to that would be the acceleration of regulatory approvals, which is currently
interesting, Mike, because we want to ask more about the specific products. You have so many subsidiaries now, but one of our faithful listeners, Stephen, wants to know if maybe we'll get some more fast-track FDA approvals for stem cell products and stem cell research. Actually, he's a fan of stem cell. He's got a lot of questions for you. We're going to come back with more. Dr. Michael West, BioTime on Bloomberg Radio. So I want to let's start there broadly. Once again, where are we? Are the products developed yet that someone has a stroke and they don't get to the hospital fast enough? That's one of the things you guys were talking about yesterday. You can use a stem cell product, inject it in that heart and repair the damage. Similarly, you were talking about you guys are working on an arthritis kind of regenerative product. How do you have products actually that you can sell to the hospitals? How close are you if you're not?
Yeah, we're within a year or so, next year anyway, we'll be launching our first product we call Renevia, which is a fundamentally important product in all this. But, like you said, let's back off and look at the big picture. The way I would communicate where we're at today is imagine, the electronics revolution, Silicon Valley.
Sure.
We began with, of course, the fundamental discovery of the transistor and these little components, and then the ability to miniaturize them into these little microchips and so on. And where we're at today, if you went behind the laboratories of one of these computer companies and saw what was on their lab bench, is we have a number of inventions that work on the lab bench. So, like if you were to take an inside peek into Apple computer in 1980, they'd say, here's the Mac computer. It's still in prototype form. It's not on the market yet. And all these products in development, what I can tell you is, because it's not so secret in our case, we have therapies under development which work in animal models, just like they would work on a bench, for macular degeneration, the age-related degenerative disease of the eye, which is the number one cause of blindness in the aging population, a huge problem, afflicting many millions of people. As you mentioned, osteoarthritis product is under development, cardiovascular applications, technologies to target tumors and destroy them. So there's a wide array of applications. Some of them will begin rolling out next year for BioTime.
I want to ask one of Steve's questions now. Will stem cells products research be given more fast-track FDA approvals?
Well, that's an unknown. One of our board members, Dr. Andrew von Eschenbach, was the commissioner of the FDA, wrote an op-ed recently saying that what we're doing in the United States. We have this age wave underway, and everyone's got spending money, the aged population, hopefully. 70% of the financial assets, I think, are held by an aging population. And so they're saying, I hear about all these products under development. Well, can I go to other countries without naming them, offshore, and get these therapies now? You saw this, you hear it in the news when sports figures get their spine rebuilt or whatever with stem cells. I'd really encourage people not to do that. On many cases, these types of products are not real. I suppose the best scenario is that they're not real because then they won't hurt you. But in the United States, why can't we lead the pack on this? And Dr. von Eschenbach, who ran the FDA, is saying we're regulating the development of new products too slowly and using policies that are from the last century. And so he's proposing a remodeled approach to developing regenerative medicine products. Whether we do it, whether we can turn this big ship of the FDA around in time, no one knows.
When do you think we could turn the FDA around?
Well, we don't have to, of course. There's still that we can, do it the way we've always done it. So we go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, maybe a limited even phase 4. And people have these products. I think if you sense a bit of passion in my voice, it's two things. One, I really believe in the United States. We've led the world historically in technology and medicine. Why would we fumble the ball on the 1-yard line? We've got an aging population, 76 million Americans needing these new therapies. And we need to get there quickly because we could cut costs, not increase costs, by fixing these diseases. So people don't need hip surgeries and all these expensive therapies. So I think we can get there. We'd like to get there faster. It's very important for our country. It could bust the bank on Medicare.
So, another question from Stephen: Are there safer stem cell technologies approaches than others? And what are the dangers? Are there dangers of stem cell technology? So the safer ones versus what are the dangers?
When all of this was such a political debate, I kept thinking they must think we can make a stem cell bomb. These are human cells. These are what we're built from. We're made of trillions of these. The danger would be is, in my mind, the number one thing on my list would be if someone has a loved one with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or something, and you hear about everyone's opportunistically setting up clinics offshore offering, we take Visa, fly in, and we'll $50,000 and we'll cure your disease. My concern is, that's in many cases a sham, and in worst case scenario, there's documented cases where people have been harmed by such unapproved, unscientific, unregulated therapies.
Your stock's gotten beaten up lately. Why? I think you're down to, $3 and change. Your all-time high is up around $9. Not too long ago, you were around $6. What has happened? And I mentioned to you a couple of articles I found on Seeking Alpha where they're basically saying, BioTime, track record of broken promises. Mike West keeps promising all these things are going to happen and they don't. Very negative on the company. Does that kind of argument, has that had an impact on your stock? What is it?
I think so. Sure. I haven't seen that in the last 20 years in biotech. Historically, biotech's been held by institutional investors, and of course, Genentech had to lose $1 billion before it became profitable. It didn't come under short attacks, but you're
saying that's a short attack?
Yeah, well, absolutely is a short attack. Of course, I think if the authors in many cases would not be anonymous and set off offshore attacks on the company, we would potentially know better. But these companies, all the stem cell companies, are vulnerable right now because we're not yet profitable. BioTime has positioned itself to be the potentially the first significantly profitable company by having products, as I mentioned. We plan to launch next year and another major product in 2014. But in the meantime, yes, we're vulnerable companies for short attacks. I would encourage investors to do their homework and research the filings we have with the SEC and more detailed information in the company instead of listening to uninformed short attackers.
What's your biggest competition right now?
Well, our big competition was Geron Corp, my first company. I started that company. It was where the embryonic stem cell revolution began. Geron stopped its stem cell programs in part because, let me explain what happened here. These cells are so powerful, they make all the cells of the human body. And sorting through all this, there's thousands of different types of cells in the human body. It's amazing. And sorting through those cells and making a purified product was an enormous challenge for the scientists at Geron. And not to understate the heroic effort that they put forth to launch the first human clinical trials on a product made from these cells. They developed it for spinal cord injury. But the costs of that product development was simply too much. What we've done is we've re-engineered these technologies so that they're elegant and simple today and far easier to develop. So major competition really probably at one point will be the large pharmaceutical companies.
What
but right now
about
it's biotech.
China? That was one of the very compelling presentations. You have a subsidiary, BioTime Asia, doing a lot of marketing of the stem cell. You have one of your subsidiaries is more or less an information online kind of service, right? And these other things. But it was just very one of the things that really struck me was the head of that subsidiary talking about how China has put so much emphasis on stem cell research. It's a national priority. The scientists at the Chinese Science Academy saying it's their best hope for a Nobel Prize in the next decade. You get the feeling, well, what are we doing when we've got so much of this under our nose? Do we not recognize the importance that the Chinese are seeing right now?
I know. Well, the Chinese have an aging population too. But let me tell you an anecdote. I think it summarizes the whole thing. I sat in Wuhan, which is the technology park in China. It's being built, I guess it has been built, for 30,000 employees. Sat in the main office for a luncheon, and on the wall was a framed Chinese script. And I asked my colleague to translate it, and it was written by a Chinese general, and it said, "Today, Silicon Valley, tomorrow, Wuhan." And it concerned me a bit, this being written by a general.
Yeah.
I saw it as a military-type issue. I tell you, the scientists, the people I meet in China, they're aggressive. They have a spirit of wanting to dominate the world, but it's not, I don't think, a military one. It's just a competitive one. And if the United States listened to that and responded, I think we'll be just fine. Well,
Mike West, maybe someone is listening, and we appreciate having you back. BioTime, Mike West is the CEO, and we'll hope to have you back soon. This whole area of stem cells and this regenerative medicine is fascinating, holds great promise. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
This is Bloomberg Radio.